The Calling is my 8th inspirational book, and this book alone has won 6 international awards. I was just seeing this. I released this book way back in 2016. Not way back, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And at that time, I had won a total of 6 international awards, and now it's 20. So I'm doing a series of videos where I'm talking about the book, the characters, and how they came about. So my earlier 2 videos, I spoke about, the first one was how the story came out to be of The Calling. The second one was about the character Arjun, and this time I'm covering the character of the Sadhu. So The Calling has 3 main characters: our main protagonist Arjun, then the transporter Chandu, and the Sadhu. So the Sadhu in the story, I already mentioned this in my first 2 videos. I had gone to the Himalayas many years ago. I don't remember when it was, 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And if you have ever been to the Himalayas, your presence there is a part of an infinite presence. That was the first time I was exposed to so much space. If you've not been there, you should, to understand what I'm talking about. So while I went there it allows you to be in this zone of infinite. So I wanted my own space and my own solitude, and I didn't have it because I had gone with a large group. I'd gone with friends and my teammates, and we went white river rafting. And there is one point they just dunk you in the river and you just free flow for about 5-10 minutes and then come back on the boat. And I refused to go back on the boat. So I'm flowing with the river, and when I came out, my skin was all shriveled up because I had spent so much time in the water. And we had this break and I was really cold. So I was standing by this sandy patch while everybody was eating, and I didn't want to eat. When you are in the presence of this infinite space, which allows you, and why I say infinite, because anything is possible in a zone of infinity. I was not hungry. I didn't want to talk to anybody, and while I was standing there, I saw this water going upstream, and I've spoken about this in my first video of The Calling as well, part 1. And I started to follow this upstream, and then there was this big boulder just like I have described in the book, and I climbed on it. If you ask me why, I was just curious that where is this going? And sometimes, if you're solely led by your curiosity, I find that to be a very spiritual zone where you just want to know, where you just are moving forward based on a whim. Whim, sounds like a very frivolous word, but that's not what I mean. I mean because it's flowing there and I want to go in that direction. So I climbed onto that boulder, and while I just go across it, there was sitting this entity, this Sadhu, this being, and I have described him as well in my first video. He was ash smudged, that grayish ash on him, and ash beaten smudge. So it was not freshly smudged. It's as though it was there for a long time. It had even rained on him, so there were these streaks of water, and even all through his eyelids, which means he had not even opened his eyes. He had a huge bun, that deadlock, or what do you call it, dreadlock on his head with malas, the Rudraksh mala. And he had this little wooden stump with the U shape where your elbow fits. And while he was sitting like that, this part of his hand was just pure bone. The skin was tight on it. There was hardly any muscle. And the impression it gave me was that how long has this guy been sitting there for this part of his arm to become just bone? He was skinny, his skin, his stomach was curved inward, probably not eaten for I don't know how long, and there was this sense of, I own this planet. I own this universe, and you, little woman, you're in my space. I own you. I stood there for the longest time. I don't know whether it was a few seconds, a few minutes, or even days. And I tell you this in all honesty, that I do not remember my journey back. I remember very clearly every footstep that I took in that direction, but I have no memory of the footsteps being traced back to where I was standing originally. And for the longest time, I always had this in my mind that I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to spend more time. I mean, if there was somebody I would want to meet once. When we play these games and they say, who would be that person that you would like to meet? I want to meet that Sadhu, because I never had a conversation with him. I mean, he didn't look like a guy who had given up on life. He looked like a being who owned it all. We think that spiritual means give up everything, stop eating and be in solitude and cut yourself off. He didn't look like an entity or a being who had cut himself off. He appeared to be someone who was intimately connected, and that's what touched me. And I said, hey, I want to have a conversation with this fellow. And that's how I wrote The Calling in a parallel universe, where I had a full-blown conversation, message and learning from that Sadhu. And I also knew, like the story is not just conversations with the Sadhu. He teaches Arjun life lessons through his own experience. So he's leaving it on Arjun to decipher for himself, because I knew that if I ever met this guy ever and had a conversation with him, he would not give me straight answers, because he knew, not because he had experience. Like when you read the book, the Sadhu is even helping Arjun sort out his work life. He didn't know that by experience, but he was in that innate state of omnipresence, of all pervasion, of all knowing, because he is connected. That's how he knows. He doesn't have to live through it. He doesn't have to have that experience. He just needs to connect. And that is a very special place of wisdom and knowing. And that's what the Sadhu did. That's what he brought for me, to be in that zone of all knowing, because you can connect. And when can you connect? When you have that space around you, when there is an infinity flow around you which allows you to have anything in your space. And by be and have, I don't mean own it. I mean be and have as a participant, as someone who pervades through it. Well, pardon me if I'm going on another tangent, but that's what the Sadhu meant for me. So the entire story of The Calling is about Arjun meeting the Sadhu. But you see, my main intention of writing The Calling was to get Arjun to meet the Sadhu. So in the beginning, right from the beginning, I'm preparing Arjun's character. I'm preparing his life. I'm preparing his problems to be worthy of him meeting the Sadhu. So in the end, what he gets, I had already planted that in the beginning. The gravity of his problems, the gravity of his obstacles, the depth of his suffering was all going to lead him to the Sadhu, because that's where the solution lay. So I always remind myself, when things become overwhelming or out of my control, I'm like, hey, that's amazing. Because if Arjun's problems were just too petty and small, they were not worthy of his encounter with the Sadhu. They were not worthy of that divinity. They were not worthy of that resolve. And so I love big problems. The Sadhu is found in solitude, where curiosity is bigger than distraction. You are not going with the flow, you're following the flow upstream and overwhelmed and questioning why. Not because you want something out of it, not because you want to make it your goal or purpose, but taking it as a clue of being led somewhere. You earn the Sadhu in a place where you have lost everything and you want to find yourself. That's the Sadhu I created in The Calling. That's the Sadhu I am. Well, as they say that all characters stem from the author's personality, experience or truth, the Sadhu somewhere is me. Not in totality, but The sadhu is my journey to where I want to be. I'm a person of great solitude. I love my space. I find myself in situations where I can easily disconnect, where I can have and be without owning. I have a very poor sense of possession, and people call me detached and dispassionate, and I love that space because I have it and I don't have it, because I have it all but I don't need it necessarily with me in my space. I am a lot like that sadhu, and I would say I'm at the beginning of where the sadhu was, and my aspiration is to reach where he is. So I want to read an excerpt of what the sadhu tells Arjun in one of the encounters, in one of the tests, and these are these cute bookmarks which we give with the book. So here it is. It reads as, "You are known by what you do, about where you are. If you want to know the power of an individual, see what he does with his space, the world that he owns, his home, his family, his work, and his area of influence. The circle he draws around him marks his sphere of control and responsibility. The condition, the progress, the destiny of the space assigned to you is in your hands, and you did nothing." So this is where Arjun had failed one of the tests, and he continues saying, "Every person in our world has a significant role in our purpose, especially those who are a part of your journey. Your wife, your children, your colleagues. People are in our lives and our path for a contribution by virtue of who they are. When people's purposes meet, then their paths align and they come together for a common purpose. And everyone who is a part of your life is like a parallel line running alongside you, and as long as you allow people to be, to contribute to you while still being who they are and growing in their journey with you, your world is safe with them and their world is safe with you." So you can read more in my book, The Calling, and I would love to hear from you. Like I said, my book, my work has connected me with like-minded people, and if this story resonates with you, if this book lands up in your hand, you are a part of my purpose, and I want to connect with you.